And we're live. And we're live a minute late. And I want to say a word about why we're live a minute late. We are live a minute late because today turns out to be one of those days when the gods screw up my plans. And, I don't resent the gods for this because it's their prerogative. But sometimes, I get on my computer in plenty of time to start the show on time. Hello, Ava.
She
Hi.
was exactly at 3 on the dot.
Can't hear you.
Can you not hear me?
No, you are silent. I'm going to monologue while you fix your audio. Um, and, it just turns out to be one of those mornings after the gods of Apple decided to update my computer. And so I am logged out of everything. And the computer runs at the speed of molasses because it's interpreting all these new instructions that it gets. And then I get to Riverside. Can we hear you now?
Hello?
No, we cannot. The computer gets to Riverside and we're logged out of Riverside. And so we
Oh,
log
Ben.
Riverside and it takes forever because the computer's running at the speed of molasses. And then
Okay, guys, any ideas for how I
happens,
can convey this to Ben?
my microphone, the one that's hanging here, gets caught on my shirt. And as I'm sitting down in um, in in the hammock studio, and all of a sudden, we have John Hawkinson is interrupting. Hello, John Hawkinson.
We can hear you just fine,
I
Ben.
can't hear you. This suggests that the problem is on my end, not on Nastia's end. Nastia, can I hear you now?
Hello.
No, I cannot. Um,
So I guess Ava and I are
uh,
hosting the show without Ben.
well, let's try it this way then. I suspect we are running through this audio. How about now? Are you in my ear?
Hello.
Yeah, you are. Look at that. See, here
Amazing.
I was blaming Nastia for everything, and the problem was on my end all the time. Um, Meanwhile,
You look like Trump.
so look at this. The microphone gets caught on my shirt, and I just ripped it off its stand. So it is now hanging precariously for all of which minutes, for all of which reasons, I was exactly 1 minute late to starting the show. And I have now taken 4 minutes explaining that. And so I want everybody to experience my deepest, heartfelt apologies. Hello, Ava. All right, but that's not what I was here to monologue about today. What I'm here to monologue about today is the death of an enemy. And out of respect for the dead and the many people who loved this person, I am not going to name him.
Come on, Ben.
I'll name him to you privately, but
Okay.
it's somebody you never heard of, and
Okay.
probably almost all of you never heard of.
Okay.
But I read over the weekend, and look, I'm not going to do this in a way you can hunt down who this person is. It won't be very interesting to you, but
Is it some Russian diplomat?
no. It's an English professor at a small college. And
Okay.
when I was a college student, I had this idea that I was going to do an honors thesis in my college, and I was prevented from doing that um, by this man because he did not like me. And I have never sat down with him and asked him the why did you not like me question because, that's just the kind of thing that you don't do. Because people actually do have the right not to like you. And so imagine poor young me. And by the way, I want to hold out the possibility that may have been an obnoxious asshole in his class. And so he may have had good reason to not like me, because there are actually a lot of people over the course of my life who have not liked me. Um,
Really?
yeah,
Really hard to imagine for
it's
me.
really hard to imagine. I know, Nastya, but there are these people who don't like me, and this gentleman was just one of them, um, and he refused to let me into his class, his for the which was the workshop through which one wrote honors theses in the English department of this particular college. And so, as a junior in college, I was ripped in half,
Wait, did you
because
study English in college?
English literature and Japanese history. And
What? That's so random.
oh, it's
That's
the best.
history.
You want to learn how to read a statute, start by learning how to read a sonnet. It's no,
I have so many questions.
totally serious about this. So anyway, I uh I could not have been more devastated, because this was really the first time in my life I had ever tried to be a good student. In high school, I just kind of opted out of the whole student thing. But when I got to college, I decided, okay, this is my chance. I'm going to be really serious about this. I'm going to play the good student, and I'm going to do everything the way a good student does it. And I did it. And I was a good student, although I wasn't a great student. But
We
I
got
was,
it.
what's that?
We got it.
I was a,
Let's get to him dying part.
I was a fine student. And then this man treated me as though I was not, one of the elect. And I was devastated. Um, and, um, and I have hated him for 30 years. And when other people have let bygones be bygones, I have not. I have nursed this hatred in my heart for a long time. Um,
Okay.
and over the weekend, I read that he had died. Um,
How
uh,
did that make you feel?
well, it made me feel very complicated, because, on the one hand, I confess that I did have this dance on the grave of my enemies uh, instinct, and that part of me said, "So die all who screw Ben Wittes, and I will outlast all my enemies," and pin notes to their bodies. But then the better angels of my nature, both of them, um, came to me, and they said, "Look, think about the favor this man did you. Because you did not do an honors thesis, you left college early." And I did. I was so embittered by this that I graduated a semester early and just left. And I actually put a pin mentally through the globe through Oberlin, Ohio, and the center of the world. And I said, where can I end up that's as far from here as possible? And the answer was New
It's shocking.
Zealand. What?
All of this is shocking to me. Like, this is
This is deep.
so far from the person that I know now, like decades later,
This
that I'm
is
like,
deep, deep Wittes history. I mean,
how is this possible?
and I put a pin through the center of the earth, and it came out somewhere near New Zealand, and I said, that's where I'm going. And I put a bicycle on a plane for New
You're
Zealand, and
joking.
I put the bicycle together at the airport, and I biked about 3,000 kilometers around the South Island of New Zealand and elsewhere. And during
Yeah,
which
but you
time
ended up in Russia.
I did not end up in Russia. I have never been to Russia, and now cannot go. Um, so during that time, I decided that I should get married. And um, and I did, as a crazily young person, got married. And by the way, none of this would have happened if not for mine enemy. I wouldn't have been in New Zealand. I would have been in Oberlin, Ohio, writing a senior thesis.
What did
And
you want to do the thesis about?
I don't even remember. It's the denial of the opportunity. I mean, I did write a long paper about Keats and Shelley and explosions of creative energy and but so I may have done something with that. I don't know. The point is I was doing something I was on plan B. And one thing that I learned from this is that you always have a plan B. Because plan A, if you're people like me, plan A never works. And so, because you're the kind of person that it doesn't matter how well you do in school, they're not going to let you write a senior thesis. Because maybe it's because you're an asshole and they know it, or maybe it's because they're assholes. I don't know. And I stopped caring and I stopped wanting to play at all through the system. And so I came back and I have always had a plan B. And so um, I feel well served by my confrontation with my enemy, though he probably to his dying day had a very limited sense of my existence. Because I was just some student 30 years ago who was probably an asshole and, he didn't let into his honors class. And but I have nursed this for a long time. And by the way, it required his death for me to think about the fact that I benefited by this mistreatment in every possible way. I'm literally married because of it. I'm my like whole aspects of my career ethos were formed in response to it. And so I want to
This is
say
so deep, Ben. I
I
did not expect this.
I want to say to my enemy, rest in peace. I'm sure you were a great professor to others. You were a terrible professor to me, and
Jesus.
that's okay. That's exactly what I needed at that point in my life. All of which is a really long way of saying the sun is shining, which isn't true. The birds are chirping. It's going to be a great frickin' day, and you are watching Dog Shirt TV, and it is a goddamn revolution in morning television. And one of the revolutionary features, of which there are many, is that I sometimes tell you the deep lore of my life because I saw on Facebook that a professor of mine from 30 years ago, whom I have really spent a lot of time detesting over the years, is dead. And I felt bad about it in a fashion that is surprised me. And one of the revolutionary features, of which there are many, is that Laura Donna will sometimes just show up um, and and has a is this a monologue rating chart?
It is.
And the monologue is rated great.
Yes, that's all.
Oh, okay, excellent. And that we have, even in Holly's absence, a monologue rating system. And one of the revolutionary features is that I have just spent 15 minutes babbling instead of cava e vino, coffee and wine, with Anastasiia Lapatina and Ava, who is by now so drunk that with the vino part of cava and vino. You having wine, Ava?
No, she just woke up.
Did you
Like
just wake
literally.
up?
I was praying that we're gonna have 15 minutes of normal conversation, and then she started whining from the other room at 3 p.m. on the dot, which is when the show starts for me.
Excellent. That's your job, Ava. Make sure nothing's easy.
Yes. Oh, you have no
Right?
idea.
Nothing's easy.
Yesterday was a proper disaster. Yes,
Disaster.
it
Okay.
was a
For the audience, because now you have introduced the term disaster,
Yes.
what is a disaster and how is it different from a disaster?
No, a disaster is anything Ava does that makes us just wanna jump off our balcony. And it
Just for people who
happens.
don't speak Slavic languages, the word disaster is not a word in either Ukrainian
No,
or
it's
any
just a
other
Slavic
Slavic.
accent spin.
It's
Yeah,
right. It's just the way Nastia expresses
yeah,
how she would pronounce disaster if she
yeah,
had more of an accent than she does.
yeah. But she's been throwing like real tantrums. It's crazy. She was like an angelic child for a year, and shit she pulls off now. I'm just like, who are you? Like, what's going on? But we are gonna go see. We checked out the kindergarten for her near our place, and we're gonna go meet the kindergarten psychologist person tomorrow for them to do an evaluation of whatever, whether Ava
Excellent.
is ready or whatnot. We are thinking of just like leaving her there and running away, letting them just figure it out. But yeah, she's been. I call it forceful. She's been really forceful recently,
All right.
which is great for her career and terrible to deal with right now. So,
Well, we're not allowed to have fun anymore, but as you can see, we are allowed to have kava i vino, coffee and wine, because it's wine time in Kiev. Um, so, Nastia, what's on your agenda today? What are we talking about?
I wanted to ask you about the Congress Republicans and um, and how sanctions work. Though that's probably better suited question for your wife, but I'm sure you know stuff that I don't. All of this in relation to the Lindsey Graham bill
Right.
that he's working on, that supposedly he's gathered a bunch of support for, and there is like a veto-proof majority of senators who would vote for it. So I just want to like unpack what that even means. Like, does that mean that randomly they can decide to vote on it, pass it, and Trump can't do anything about it? That seems improbable. So anyway, just how do the mechanics of sanctions work there?
Okay, so first of all, this is uh, we think of sanctions as a presidential power, but they're not. Like tariffs, they're actually a congressional power that Congress has passed these sort of big sweeping laws, primarily a law with the unfortunately amusing acronym of AIPA, which is, really fun to say. Let's see if we can make Ava laugh with that. Ava, AIPA, AIPA,
Ava.
AIPA. Yeah, it's funny. The more you think about AIPA, the funnier it is, actually. All
I'm
right.
so confused.
Yeah, it's funny. AIPA. Now it's got you laughing too. Um, so, but Congress can also pass these much more specialized sanctions bills. Um, and there is a precedent for this in the specific case of Russia, which is in 2017 when Russia had just interfered in the US election. And there was a lot of bipartisan anger about that did not include Donald Trump, because number one, Donald Trump was the beneficiary of the interference. And number two, he was then, as now, weirdly solicitous of Putin. And so what Congress did is it wrote a sanctions bill and passed it with a veto-proof majority, which guaranteed that Trump would sign it, because Trump doesn't want to have something passed over his veto. And so Trump ended up, these Russia sanctions were really the most significant sanctions since after the war in Crimea. After the sanctions imposed then were fairly weak, and Congress kind of doubled down. And so Congress has a bit of a history of, using sanctions law to take Russia policy seriously when Trump refuses. Um, and Whether they would do the same thing now, I don't know. I have no doubt that it would pass the House with a large majority, but it would have to get a vote in the House to do that. Um, I think the major significance of this is not the possibility of actual legislation, though that's a interesting possibility. The most significant feature of it is that Congress is putting pressure on the administration to hold the line on Russia. It's not simply saying we don't care if you do 100 deals with the Russians and sell out Ukraine. It's actually the pressure from Congress is non-trivial. It's not simply Democrats whining. It includes very close allies of the president, like Lindsey Graham. And so I think that is atmospherically quite significant. The fate of the actual bill, I'm not sure matters all that much. But the other feature that's interesting is a whole lot of things have been aligning in Ukraine's direction over the last, I would say, 3 weeks. One is that, the president has clearly, in his own crazy way, lost patience with Putin. Whether Why exactly, I'm not sure, because it's not like Putin has done anything. I don't mean to defend Putin, but it's not like he has done anything that he hasn't done 1,000 other times. Um, he's, but Trump seems genuinely shocked that Putin won't just stop the war because Trump asks him to. Um,
Which, by the way, I want to talk about as well because um, you mentioned this in a conversation with me a few days or weeks ago that like you're not exactly sure what Putin is doing here. That like, and I've seen other. Okay, we're whining. I know I'm mad about Putin as well. Do you want to come here and stop the whining? Okay, this is now just the monotone sound of our household.
yeah.
It's marvelous. But basically that like, and I've seen several people, like experts and stuff, talking about this and writing about it, that Putin is kind of acting weirdly because he's gotten so many concessions out of the US. Like Trump has given him nearly everything that he could have asked for, and like shit that's been like insane to even think about, like the recognition of Crimea peace, for example. And Putin is still pressing for his maximalist demands and like walking away from any peace settlement. And like, even though it's clearly angering the US, and even this Victory Day ceasefire stupid proposal that Ukraine rejected, like it seems like even Trump isn't buying that anymore. Ava, you're making this really hard for me right now. Really hard.
Yeah. So,
So you got what I mean, that like I don't know what's happening, like what is Putin counting on?
well,
But yeah.
so I don't look, I don't I think the person who identified this very clearly months and months ago was Ann Applebaum, who said, you know, why anybody thinks that Putin will stop short of his maximalist demands um, is really not obvious. He's very clear about his maximalist demands. He's given up 700,000 killed and injured for them, so he's got a huge sunk costs issue. Um, he's making progress, albeit slowly. So why would he stop? Um, and I think there's always been a lot of wisdom to that. Um, and Trump seemed to believe that his force of personality and that he's such a great deal maker would, change that calculation for Putin. But I'm not really sure why anybody bought it. And as you know, I, in one of our earlier conversations, I said, look, one possibility is that Putin's recalcitrance will force Trump quietly back into the hands of the Zelensky government. And to some extent, and that's clearly been the Zelensky government's play, that
Yeah.
we're going to be the good boys and girls, and we're going to tolerate all kinds of shit.
At
Um,
first we were real naughty though, and then someone spoke to us and
yes,
we turned
well,
our good
I
behavior.
think that was a bit of an accident, honestly. That was somebody losing his temper. But the, um, the Ukrainians have managed to propose, uh, agree to the American proposal for a ceasefire, sign a version of the minerals deal that is not terrible, although an honorable American administration would scrap it immediately. But we can have that conversation in 3 years if we're so lucky. Um, and um, and to agree and to be reasonable at a time when the Russians are just revealing themselves to be completely unreasonable. Now, I say revealing themselves because it wasn't like we didn't know this, but Trump didn't know it. And he really seemed to think it would make a difference if he were there being nice to Putin and sending Steve Witkoff to spout Russian propaganda. But the problem is you can spout Russian propaganda all you want, and you can question the origins of the war all you want, but you still have this problem of the Russian demands. Their minimal demands include, you know, Ukraine, nobody's allowed to rearm Ukraine. Nobody's, they're
Us
insane.
withdrawing from more territory.
Right.
Like
They're
that's what they say is like the basis for us to even get talking. They're
right.
like and you have to agree that Ukrainians leave the entirety of Kherson Oblast and Zaporizhia Oblast, that Americans recognize that. We have to agree to that, and then we'll start negotiating. Like
Right.
that's insane.
Right. And so you go for, it turns out that all the crazy talking points are actually negotiating points, right? And then, and that they don't move if you're nice to the Russians. Because actually, to Putin's credit, he's been relatively consistent about what he wants, which is a puppet government in Western Ukraine and Eastern Ukraine incorporated into Russia. I mean, if you listen to him over time, that's what he's been saying. And I just don't
Kind of
see.
like with Trump. Like you just have to listen to what he says.
Right. But ironically, Trump, who has this quality himself, doesn't believe
Doesn't
it
get it.
about Putin, right? And Putin, by the way, who's much more articulate than Trump, right? When Putin says what he wants, it's not like,
That's it with a historical essay
oh yeah,
that's 2 hours
I mean, it
long.
takes 5 hours to
It's
listen to it, but it's not subtle what he's saying, and you have, and he has a whole 24-hour television, media that's blaring these maximalist positions. I mean, all right, leave aside how naive do you have to be not to take it seriously over time, especially when he's in the hole for 700,000 bodies, right? He you're going to come back after you've killed 700,000 of your own people to, he doesn't care about the Ukrainians that he's killed, but he does have, you know, you're going to come back to your population and say, okay, I settled for basically what we already had, with a little, we got some Mariupol and some, we got that corridor to Crimea,
You
but
just some ruins,
right,
like it's
right. But
so
other than that, it's basically, a bust. And, but I'm coming back to you because, like, okay, this is the best we can do. That's a pretty tough sell, even in an authoritarian uh, society. So I think Trump has realized, and he all but said it on NBC's Meet the Press this weekend. I don't know if did this get any play in Ukraine that Trump said, one of the sides is being reasonable and the other side isn't, and I'm not going to say which that is, but it might surprise you. And it was
I
clear.
think yeah, I've read that, but I haven't seen anything specific about this in Ukraine yet.
It's clearly that, like, the Ukrainian policy is working, which is
Yeah.
to say, rope a dope and agree to everything or almost everything, however unreasonable, from the United States, and let Putin fuck it up.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and um, and so I think you know I know you have your problems with your president, but he's actually played this really well, as has the foreign ministry. And I think they've
Uh,
they've
was it
done.
your idea though? Or did someone from certain European capitals come and scolded us?
So first of all, it doesn't matter. A
Well, it does.
a
If you're praised,
policy a policy that is adopted and followed through and is successful is a credit to the government that does it, you know, even if the genesis of the policy was uh, Macron and Keir Starmer saying, "Hey guys, you got to lay low and agree to everything," even if it comes from people who are practiced at managing Trump. It's a skillfully executed good policy, and the ambassador Markarova, who was on one of the talk shows yesterday, was you know, I thought very skillfully saying we're agreeing to everything, right? And Trump is our American friends are realizing that our adversary is completely unreasonable, and I think that is. First of all, the right move for her to make, but secondly, descriptively an accurate account of, and here's the thing that nobody knows the answer to, and anybody who claims to is just talking out of their ass. What happens when Trump really becomes convinced? He'll never say I was wrong, but
of
he
course.
really becomes convinced that the problem is not Volodymyr Zelensky or the Ukrainians. The problem is really that his friend Putin,
Isn't his friend?
well, certainly isn't his friend, but also that there's just no deal to be done with him. Is his reaction to that, if you go back to the Trump optimists in Ukraine from after,
Yeah,
who,
they're making a bit of a resurgence
right,
recently.
who I said were completely wrong, right? In the short term, I was right. Could they be right in the longer term that, Trump, having been backed into this corner by Putin, will actually lash out by being supportive of Ukraine? I don't, conversely, could he do it very quietly, not be actively supportive of Ukraine, but not be keep a certain amount of military aid going, keep intelligence aid going? Could he back into a quiet, reasonable corner here? And could he find that assisting Europe in assisting Ukraine is a great way to reduce the US footprint, but also to help Ukraine? How will he feel when he feels really punked by Putin?
It's a great question. And I guess for him to do that, they would need to exit the negotiations, right? Because that like they have to make some sort of explanation for where all of those efforts have led.
So
So
they would have to have um they would have to acknowledge that the deal is not happening. And he almost did that this weekend. I mean, he sounded discouraged, and I hate listening to his voice, but I listened to the whole interview, and I found his comments on this genuinely encouraging. Like he seemed to be like, gee, we've tried to be helpful and the Russians just won't take yes for an answer. He doesn't say it that way, but I don't know. I think he's at an interesting psychological point. And he's um and
it's probably an ego thing, right?
oh
Like
yes,
obviously
always.
he doesn't actually give a shit about like Ukraine and doing what's right. It's more of like I'm sure he just feels that like what do you mean you're not listening to me, right? Like I can go and order around all of these people and throw people in Venezuelan jails or sorry in El Salvador in jails there and have their president like be my puppet, but like what do you mean you're not listening to me? Like I think he's just mad like in that psychological way.
Well, I think I think all of that is right, but I think there's a deeper thing, which is this is somebody who put a huge amount on the line about, I mean, remember, there are a lot of Americans who think he's a Russian agent, right? That people genuinely believe this.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's not obviously incorrect. I
Yeah,
mean, he's,
there are some suspicious things happening decades ago.
yeah,
You
there's,
write about this to this
well,
day.
I have written about it.
Right.
I have, um,
It's not improbable. Let's put it
well,
that way.
I would say there is an unexplained thing, which is his solicitude for Vladimir Putin in the face of all the evidence. And there is a million connections that make that particularly suspicious. I have never argued that he is a Russian agent. I actually don't believe it. But I do believe that if he were a Russian agent, he wouldn't be behaving any differently. And so he's, I don't think it deeply doesn't matter. Um, that said, um, the relevant point for current purposes is that he is somebody who has put a huge amount on the line on the idea that he and Putin can get along and that he can get to a reasonable place with Putin. And now you have this acid test of that, and Putin is making it a fool of him. And so it's not, it's everything that you say plus historic, like a kind of historic blow to the way he's presented himself vis-a-vis Putin. And I think there's, that raises the cost, the question of like, okay, he's never going to give Zelensky a big hug and say, we're with you as long as it takes. Not that the Ukrainians love that line
I
either,
was just gonna
but
say,
he's never going to do
honestly,
that.
that's fine.
Yeah, but the question is, how does he react psychologically to this, um, the word that keeps coming to mind is punking.
Well, so there were already news that supposedly the US is preparing for the first sale of military equipment to Ukraine. So there was this thing about the State Department and the Pentagon working together and like the State Department approved a Pentagon like request to sell F-16 maintenance things to Ukraine. And so, as far as I understand, the White House has to sign off on that. So it's like a potential sale. But the fact that the State Department can't approve something unless, right? Is that assumption correct? That like if the
My
State Department
guess
approves
is, if,
a yes,
well, nothing's a yes with Trump until it happens because he
sure.
changes his mind constantly.
Like with the case of the Atlantic entry, which we can talk about, by the way.
So that said, I think if the State Department were anticipating difficulty, it would not have put out that it's approved this. And you do have a situation now in which Marco Rubio is both the Secretary of State and the White House National Security Advisor. So,
And of USAID
and the
and
head of USAID, but
I've-
USAID doesn't approve weapons sales. The
it
NSC is
doesn't-
the coordinating mechanism for that kind of thing. So I think there's, now it's a small sale. As I recall, it's like $50 million or something.
No, that was a separate thing. It's the same but separate. It was at least 50 million, but the actual sale is going to be around 350 million.
Okay, so that's not
Still
trivial.
not that.
No, but it's not
Oh.
true. I mean, but look, we measure Ukraine aid in the tens of billions of dollars.
Exactly.
And so, but look, there's also an in for a dime, in for a dollar quality, right? If you're, if you're, you want like once it's a little bit like it's a gateway drug. Once once you have your marijuana, eventually you end up shooting heroin, and once you give your 350,
That's an opinion, Ben.
that
We can unpack that with our experiences of college, I guess.
and once you have your $350 million, eventually you end up with a $60 billion supplemental.
Right. Well, as I wrote in my Substack, like it doesn't really matter what the monetary quality here is. It's more of I think, a great political signal that it's even possible. Because
That's right.
whether that was going to be possible wasn't at all self-evident. Right.
Yes, once you accept the logic of us continuing to support Ukraine,
Even if we have to pay for it, like that's fine, given everything.
once you accept the logic, you have a 600-mile front that is eroding in certain places. And what are you going to do about that? And, you get into this cycle of thinking that is healthy. And I never want to give Trump credit because he almost never does the right thing for the right reason. But I will always take the right thing for the wrong reason as a backup. And I do think he's being backed into a healthy place here.
Yeah.
And is fighting it honestly less than I expected him to. I thought, like, seriously, people, listen to the interview with Kristen Welker over the weekend, or read it if you can't stand the sound of his voice. He was crazy on a lot of things, but he was not. And look, there's a million things he says that are always terrible, like he's trying to save 5,000 Russian lives a week and that sort of thing. But okay,
we're not going to do that.
Control for all of that. And just look at the policy that he's stating. And he did seem to say, if I can't get this done, I'm going to be pissed at the people who stood in the way, and I'm not going to say yet who that is. 3 weeks ago, he was saying it was Volodymyr Zelensky, so he was perfectly happy then to say who it is. So what else is on your mind this morning, Nastya?
Apart from the usual Russians in the Arctic stuff.
Well, yeah, so you're off to the Arctic.
Yeah, in like 2 weeks.
Are we going to do a show from the high Arctic?
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, we have to brainstorm all of the things that I can do.
Yeah,
I'm
so
like,
tell us about what you're doing in in the Norwegian town of Kirkenes.
Yes.
First of all, can you show us on? Let me while you're talking, I'm gonna pull up a map and show
Okay.
where Kirkenes is going, where it is, and you're gonna tell us what you have to do in order to get there.
Hello, Ava. Right. So there is a security conference happening in this. It's sort of a big deal. There are a bunch of Norwegian like cabinet ministers, people. Like I think the defense minister is coming, and a bunch of other important people. Um, so it's a
Okay, can you
great.
see this?
Yep.
Okay, so um, I'm gonna let Nastia talk, and I'm gonna shut up. But I just want to show you before I shut up where this is, which is uh, uh, we've got whoops, not Hensig. Um, we've got Russia, we've got Norway. Russia,
And Sweden is kind of awkwardly
yeah.
there as well.
So it's
It's a very
sitting
weird.
there right on the border, and while Nastia talks, I will show you just how far north it is.
Yeah. If Ava will let me. So basically, I'm going to that conference. Invited as a speaker, as one of the people, as one of the panelists. I don't think I'm going to be on the panel. I'm just gonna do like a little chat about the situation in Ukraine and the Ukrainian context. I think I'm the only Ukrainian who's going to be there. Um, but yeah, so actually that Thon Hotel is where everything's going to be happening, right on the coast. So that's happening May 21st, 22nd. But I'm flying in there like 2 days early to just hang out and see how everything is there and do some reporting and do some recon for my next project, which is about the Arctic. And I want to meet the local journalists there. The Barents Observer, this pretty important Arctic outlet, they're based in Kirkenes. So I'm gonna go meet them. It's really interesting, and it is, yeah, it's literally the Arctic. It's
Yeah,
up
so
circles.
Kirkenes
It's
is
gonna be always sunny there when I get there.
right. So
For that,
Kirkenes, the Arctic Circle runs right around. Uh, if you look at the north of Sweden, it runs through the north of Sweden. Um, so this is significantly higher than the Arctic Circle. It's well into the Arctic region. And if you uh, draw a line across, you'll see that it's sort of north of most of Nunavut in North America. So this is way north of, only Greenland goes north of here, and of course Svalbard up, where the really cool kids hang out.
yep.
So I think the technical term for it is fucking far north.
Yes, that is the technical term. But I'm actually like a little, well, maybe not a little, like reasonably worried about my safety. I have to have some conversations with like, I don't
And
know, IT people.
and the reason, Nastia, you are worried about your safety in Norway is why?
Well, because that town, like colloquially, like people call it the spy town, and there are all of these media stories portraying it as this place infiltrated by FSB agents, and I'm sure like that's not just out of thin air, right? Like
Oh,
there
no, no,
have
no.
been
It's
intelligence,
a locus of.
yeah, yeah, of intelligence gathering. So, I'm a Ukrainian journalist. It's pretty obvious that I'm a Ukrainian journalist. Like, I'm just worried about the safety of like my, I don't know, electronics and like, you know what I mean? Like meeting locals and who they might be and
I
things like that.
will. You and I
I'm
will.
not worried about being kidnapped, though my husband is. He's always worried I'm gonna get kidnapped. But in terms of like someone, I don't know, hacking my phone, like that's not completely out of the realm of possibility, right? So
Yeah, so we don't talk about this on these things because you just
you
that's
think
bad.
watching
That's
Doug Shirt
that's bad OPSEC. But let's talk privately about this. All right, I have an important question uh, about this trip, which is, what does it take to get from
oh yeah,
Kiev to Kirkenes to Spy Town?
it's fucking long is the technical term.
All right, let's
I
hear it.
was I was looking for these flights like 2 days ago, and it took fucking forever because I have to take two trains from Kiev to Krakow in Poland, and then I have to take two planes from Krakow to Kirkenes.
There
And
aren't regular flights, direct flights from Krakow to Kirkenes?
no, no, you can
How you go to
as far
Oslo?
yes, yes. So as far as I can understand, you can only fly. I mean, maybe that's not true, but any flights that I've checked out, they all go through Oslo. And so yeah, it's just a nightmare of figuring out what trains you can take and whether the schedule is aligned and the flights and the trains align. It's like a whole thing.
So is
Um,
Ava coming with you?
Jesus, no. We thought we are gonna we thought we are gonna go all together, but
Family
it's
vacation to Spy Town?
yeah, yeah. I mean, my husband was like, again, worried about things and the Russians there, so he was like, I should come with you. But no, it's just too complicated and expensive, and so I'm going alone. So that's gonna be fun.
Wow.
And yeah, it's gonna be the time of like when the sun never sets, which I'm so curious about.
I think
Like, what?
we should do like um and Minna's going to be there, right? And
Mina's gonna be there, and
Karenana's going to be there.
it's a party.
I think
It's
so.
a
I think
party.
we should do from the land of the midnight sun at midnight your time. We should do like uh
Like a live from Kirkenes.
live from the Arctic.
Yeah, I'm
Uh
down.
and it'd be like, you know, yeah, it's sunshiny. Um
Great.
are you excited about it?
I'm so excited. I'm really excited. Apart from the thing that we're not supposed to talk about.
So
Um,
what have you learned any Norwegian in advance of
no, I'm pretty sure they all speak English.
they do. They all speak English better than I do.
Yes.
But here's the confusing thing about Scandinavian languages for Ukrainians. In Ukrainian, the word tak means yes. In all of the Scandinavian languages, tak means thank you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Fun.
Um, yeah, it's super useful. It's just thank. It's, all Scandinavian languages are basically English without the French words, and they're quite close to Old Anglo-Saxon actually. And so they have these words that are wonderfully like English and grammatical structures that are indistinguishable, but the words are, so like in Swedish, I is jag. Um,
Hmm.
you know, it's fun. The Scandinavian languages are fun. And you should learn to speak Norwegian, like Pete Buttigieg. Although
What?
yeah, no,
Be-
Pete Buttigieg weirdly speaks Norwegian. Yeah,
That's there are so many random things about that man, I feel like, and this is one of them.
yeah, and his family's from Malta, hence the
What?
name Buttigieg.
Oh
Um,
my God.
all right,
Is
so
he the next face of the Democratic Party?
who knows? Um,
That should be the topic of the next Doug Shirt to me. Who
mm,
is the face of the
it's a
Democratic?
year too early for that
Okay,
conversation.
whatever. I'm
Um,
curious.
all right, we are running out of time. Anything else we should talk about before we turn
Uh,
into pumpkins?
okay, no, I was just looking at the live stream chat. I mean, I have, you know me, I have an list of things that I
I,
could say.
I will
But
point out that we had 33 people on the live stream today, and that is a
it's
record. I've never seen us at 33. We've seen at 30 and 31. But to everybody who is joined, if anybody's joined for the first time, welcome. You're great Americans or Norwegians or
or
Ukrainians or
wherever you are,
Finns, most
unless
likely.
if you're Russians, you're not great Russians.
Well,
I'm sorry.
the term great Russian has its own meaning, and I'm not sure it
We're not. That's a rabbit hole that we
yeah,
don't have.
exactly. We're not going down with 3 minutes left. Um, Folks, we're going to be back tomorrow. We have no guests scheduled this week. But that, means that there'll be a combination of episodes like this where co-hosts show up and we just have conversations. Holly is on vacation, so the cactus has gone with her. I don't think she's going to be with us this week. And But there's always the surprise guests who I book 30 seconds before the show. And so we're going to be back, and it's going to be a grab bag of potpourri of smorgasbord. And it's going to be fun. And that's all going to start tomorrow at 8. Nastia, say something wise to wrap up the show.
Be a good American and donate to Come Back Alive Foundation to help the Ukrainian army.
And also subscribe to Yours Ukrainian on Substack to support
That's less important.
one particular Ukrainian. Also, folks,
Yes.
remember that if you are not a paid subscriber of Dogshirt TV, you should become one, because that is how you support special military operations against the Russian embassy. It is how you support the acquisition of new spotlights. And I have my eye on a new light to replace Heimar the Gobo projector, who you will recall died in combat a few months ago. It is now summer here, or it is approaching summer in Washington, which is high projection season. And my Ukrainian flag gobo, along with my picture of the Russian warship "Go Fuck Yourself" image, they're crying out for more stronger lights. So I am going to be purchasing one of those, and if you want to help, the best way to do it is to become a paid subscriber to Dogshirt TV, and Dogshirt Daily, which also has the benefits of getting you inside the studio, where you, like Laura Donna and John Hawkinson, can just interrupt me in the middle of the monologue, which is really cool. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a good one.